Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello again, everybody. This is the Coach Shannon Griffith, and finally I'm getting this one put together so I can get things out this evening and get on with the Ohio State Buckeyes after some just mind-boggling technical issues tonight with my internet. And it's been I'd say this much, it's been an evening. Let's just put it that way. It's been an evening this evening. So we're going to get this thing rolling and get things to the point where we can get things talked about with these Buckeyes and then get this game playing. But first and foremost, I want to thank Bet Online for their continued support of the Hoosier Football Tailgate here on Believe. Bet Online is one of the largest online betting services that you can find, from everything from college football, NFL football, college basketball, NBA basketball, as well as UFC. Everything can be found right there at Bet Online. You can find your odds, parlays, different types of in-game parlays that you can do in exotic wagering with Bet Online. And like I said, they are the number one source for all things sports wagering. Head on over to the site today, and if you get bored with the betting side of it, don't be afraid to step into the online casino and try your hand at blackjack or poker. And if that doesn't suit you, there is plenty of slot machines, to be exact, over 150 different slot machines that you can try your luck at. Bet Online, the game starts here. And like I said, we're here again to try this one more time, as our live session was derailed by some technical issues with my internet that has been plaguing me for the last week in my uploading ability. And therefore, you can see that I am trying to get some things accomplished here this evening with everything, and wanted to get things going here with the Indiana Hoosiers and what we can expect from this football team this Saturday. But let's first take a look at what is happening in the Big Ten this week as we look at the schedule as a whole. And as you can see here with, let's get a better one up there. Let's see. That was my Big Ten table. I want to get my schedule up here if I can, so give me a second. I think I can bring her up here in a second. As there are some things that just don't want to work tonight for whatever reason. And as you can see, I'm struggling with a lot of things this evening with it when it comes to things of this nature. But I think we'll be able to get her up here in a second and see where we can get this Big Ten. There we go. Hey, looky there. Having a little luck for a change. Well, I hope Indiana I don't jinx them for Saturday with the trouble that I'm having this evening. Friday night game, Purdue at Michigan State, 8:00 up in East Lansing. That one will be on Fox Sports. And then Indiana, of course, at the Ohio State Buckeyes, noon kickoff, part of the big noon kickoff show there in Columbus, as well as College Game Day. And I do believe the Big Ten Network is going to have their crew there as well. So if you're planning on going to this game in Columbus, one, the weather looks to be pretty decently high in the 40s, overcast with a little wind. But if you're going, you're going to want to explore parking. It is a very difficult place to park in and near the stadium. So it's nothing like Bloomington. There's a lot of distance between where you may park and the stadium itself, because it's very compacted and in Columbus there. So you're going to want to scout that out or talk to somebody that's been there before when it comes to that. Then you got Wisconsin at Nebraska, 3:30 kickoff there. That will be an interesting game. Both teams have recently replaced their offensive coordinators. Wisconsin this past week, where they let go Phil Longo, Luke Fickell did after their Oregon game, and then Dana Holgerson was put in place this past week as the OC against USC. Unfortunately, lost a tough ball game, 28-20 there. But two new coordinators for both schools heading into that contest on a Saturday, and some bowl eligibility possibilities on the line there. USC, UCLA, that will be the latest game, kicking off at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, 7:30 Pacific Time. This should be a pretty good ball game, pretty good rival. UCLA has been playing better ever since Indiana saw them week 2, I believe, out in Pasadena, but UCLA has had some tough ball games, and they've won some tough ball games. Really good game is Illinois and Rutgers at noon as well, Saturday, which I do believe that's on the Big Ten Network. Rutgers just became bowl eligible, second time back-to-back for Greg Schiano, first time in school history with that. And then, of course, Illinois is on a quest to get to the 9-win season, if possible, for Brett Bielema and his, I think, second or third the year there. So they've been playing some good football. Iowa takes on the Maryland Terrapins out in Maryland and Baltimore. Now that's listed as a 6:30 start, so I need to double check that. But anyway, Iowa and Maryland, who would have thought Maryland would slide off as much as they have after having a great year last year, but that just goes to show you how important the quarterback position is, no matter what school you're at and what level you play at. Northwestern heads up to Ann Arbor to take on the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan looking for bowl eligibility as well. I do believe that's the CBS game of the week. And then the one that I'm intrigued about, Penn State and Minnesota. Here's a game that I think could have a lot of interesting side notes going on with everything on Saturday up there in Minneapolis. Minnesota is one of these teams that can always surprise somebody, and it wouldn't be surprising me one bit if Minnesota pulled an upset against Penn State. So that one there is a little interesting in that regard. From the standpoint is that you've got Penn State, who's trying to stay alive in the college football playoffs as well, and a 2-loss. Another loss for them would probably not bode well for Penn State making it. But then again, like I said, we're a long ways from that. One of my topics tonight was about the college football playoff that came out on Tuesday. We had our most recent show on Monday evening, and that we found out that Indiana had remained at the number 5 slot in both the AP and the coaches poll. And then on Tuesday, the rankings came out, and Indiana maintained the 5 spot there in the college football playoffs. And one thing that you're hearing a lot about right now, and you hear people getting all in an uproar about this, and it's really pointed at Indiana more than anybody, is Indiana and whining about who they've played, who they've not played, things of that nature. And it's gotten to the point of being, you just tune it out, because what is shown on Tuesday is a snapshot in time. And the chance of that being the way that things are going to be on any given playoff Saturday. I mean, this would be as if they were going to line up and play on this coming Saturday, as you can see how this is listed here. Right now, Alabama is a 2-loss team. Georgia is a 2-loss team. Ole Miss is a 2-loss team. So I'm not quite sure why all the SEC schools are up in an uproar, other than the fact that a 2-loss team would go on a road to play either an undefeated team like Indiana or a 1-loss team in Notre Dame and Penn State. So I guess that must be the dynamic involved there. at this point in time. So, my own personal opinion, I do believe that Indiana will make the college football playoffs. I do believe that regardless of what occurs at Ohio State this weekend, as you're having a number 3 and a number 5 play, that Indiana, if they would go in and lose to the Buckeyes, I don't believe that they would fall out of the top 11. And the only change that we would see is Indiana would be on the road that first round at the on-school games, and that would be the only thing. Now, where it gets interesting is if Ohio State would lose to Indiana, and that's not out of the realm of possibility, surprise, that would ultimately really stir it up, because at that point, Indiana would probably jump Texas and become the second-ranked team in the country behind Oregon, and those two would be 1-2. And if Indiana finished out the season undefeated, as Oregon would as well, those two teams would meet in the Big Ten championship, and then they're playing for a week 1 bye in that instance. So there could be some big ramifications there. That would also put Ohio State with 2 losses, but their 2 losses would be to the 1 rank and a 5 rank team. So I don't necessarily think that would necessarily knock them way down the pole, but I do think an Ohio State is going to be looked at as a better 2-loss team than perhaps maybe an Ole Miss or even an Alabama. And they may debate whether or not they're better than a 1-loss Notre Dame. So, yes, you can see there is so much that can happen there when you look at it from that perspective. And that's why I say you can't listen to what Paul Feinbaum says. I mean, he's an SEC apologist, and he has been for the turn of the century for the most part. And you can't listen to anything that's coming out of the South and of the country, because those people are only going to believe the narrative that they want to spin, whether it's about Georgia, about Alabama, or Ole Miss. I'm not saying they're not good teams. Don't get me wrong. And I know Georgia's a really good football team, but Texas, who's number 2 in the country, their 1 loss was to Georgia at home. And after that, they really haven't, played a overly complex schedule, where Indiana, that everybody's pointing to, has played a schedule against some Power 4 teams in the Big Ten. When Indiana played them, all of them were either at 500 overall or had a winning record. Not one of them had a losing record when Indiana played them. Nebraska was like 5-2 when Indiana played them. Michigan was 5-4. UCLA was 1-0 before Indiana played them. Northwestern, I believe, was 500, and maybe Michigan State. Maryland came into Indiana at that point in time with a winning record when Indiana played them. So this argument that Indiana has played nobody, well, it's not Indiana's fault that Michigan was ranked in the top 10 prior to the season beginning, and they haven't played to expectations, or Maryland, who was coming off an 8-win season, or Northwestern, who was also coming off an 8-win season, and I can go right down the line. So it's not Indiana's fault that those teams have underperformed, but when Indiana played them, they had a winning record or were at 500 as a football team when Indiana and that team met, whether it was on the road or at home. So I don't buy this BS about how a school strength of schedules played out, because at the beginning of the year, everybody thought Nebraska would beat Indiana. like a drum. Michigan would beat Indiana like a drum. They probably thought too that UCLA with the new Deshaun Foster and Gerber's back at quarterback would be a big challenge for Indiana, especially on the road. At UCLA, Washington was going to be, in some respects, looked at as being too big of a challenge for Indiana. Indiana has only beat those teams by a differential of 31 points. So when they've played these teams, they're not winning by a field goal or a last-second touchdown. They're throttling the teams that they've played, with one exception, Michigan. But let's not forget, Michigan's a pretty darn good football team with a good defense. The only thing that's wrong with Michigan is they're not getting any productivity out of their quarterback position. If I took Curtis Rourke and put him in the maize and blue, they are instantly probably a top 5 team in the country. That's the differential that he brings to the table as a quarterback. So, and that is why Indiana is where they're at, on top of a defense that is number 1 in the country against the rush. So say what you will, NIL is in play. People are saying Indiana bought them a team. Come on. It was equal for everybody. And besides, everybody was saying, I hope you're giggling about the group of 5 guys that came to Indiana, especially out of the Sun Belt, James Madison, Old Dominion, and I can go right down the line. And the big question was, how are you going to play a Big Ten schedule with a bunch of group of 5 guys? Well, I think they showed you why. So enough of that. It just kind of get under my skin this week a little bit about these people moaning and groaning about where we're at and in time, a moment in time. And it doesn't make any sense to be all in an uproar over something that is going to change quite, in some ways, big shifts and changes because of what we've got the final 2 weeks, and then what may and may not occur in the Big Ten and Big 12 and the ACC and the SEC championship games. So at the end of the day, Indiana's undefeated. They control their own destiny. They have nothing to lose Saturday against Ohio State. Ohio State has a lot to lose in that regard because they've got 1 loss. Indiana has none. And so Ohio State has a little bit more pressure on them than, let's say, Indiana does. So we'll see what all transpires there when it comes to it with those things. And again, I don't want to belabor any points with this and start talking about why and who and when, but at the end of the day, all of Indiana's computer rankings that are figured through different algorithms and things like that still hold Indiana in high regard, irregardless of a 106 strength of schedule. So that's kind of how I view it. So enough of that, because we got to worry about the Buckeyes, and that's the most important thing, because it doesn't mean anything until you get by this week and head into the final week of the season. And oh, by the way, just because Purdue's only won 1 game, let's not think that they're not going to give them, the Hoosiers, all they can handle in Bloomington after Thanksgiving, because it'd make their year to knock Indiana off and keep them from achieving something like going into the college football playoffs. So anyway, Ohio State, the Buckeyes, very, very, very good team. We'll get to some video here in a few minutes, but Ohio State has a very good football team. When I looked at Indiana and Ohio State, when it comes to the black and white of it, and you look at statistics, Indiana and Ohio State are right there, either in front of or behind the other in all types of different statistical categories. Howard, their quarterback, and then of course Curtis are pretty similar in terms of their completion percentages and some other things. Now, one thing that Curtis Rourke has on not only Howard but the rest of the country is that he's the number 1 efficiency rated passer in the country and the Big Ten, and he's the number 1 quarterback in efficiency rating under pressure, which is even a little bit better statistical stat, because it just shows his productivity when people blitz him and put pressure on him. He's been very good in those categories on top of everything else. So, like I said, a quarterback can be the difference between you having a good year and a bad year, because that position has to be somebody that can not only throw the ball with accuracy, but also have the mental fortitude to get you in and out of plays and keep you from and out of bad plays. So it's a very important position, whether it's high school football, college football, pro football, as we can say, because it makes a difference. And like I said, when you look at Michigan, that's one of their weakest spots on the field and productivity. And you can see what the difference of Tua made at Maryland and how good they have been over 2-year stretch with him at quarterback. So let's look at some statistical data here quickly as well, and then we'll get into some other things as we go along. Of course, I like to do these tail of the tape things, as you can see here, but what you see here now is both offenses up against one another. Scoring offense right now, Indiana 43.9, Ohio State is a 37.8. Both have come down from being in the upper 40s for the better part of the year, the last few weeks. Rushing wise, Indiana, this is where they've kind of struggled the last 2 weeks prior to the off week. 176.7 yards, which is still very good. And Ohio State's 183.3. But Indiana, for the better part of the year, had been well over 200 yards per game. In the last 2 weeks, Michigan State and Michigan, Indiana against Michigan State barely had 100 yards. And against Michigan, they had their lowest output of 40. So you can see that that has been, like I said on Monday, a little bit of a red flag. Total offense, 2 yards basically separate the both of these teams. Third down efficiency, 5 percentage points separates their efficiencies as offenses. Fourth down, Ohio State maybe has gotten a little bit more opportunities there and gone for it, and that's why they're at 71%. Indiana's at 55%. Both of those are extremely well and good, and the reason why they probably go for it is that they're within that 3 to 2 yard range on fourth down, and both have been productive that way. And the third down efficiencies, because both of them have been very good on first and second down efficiency. Fumbles lost on the year, Indiana has only lost 2. Ohio State has lost 3. Now, Ohio State's put the ball on the turf quite a bit. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 or 12 times this year. So they have been prone to put the ball on the turf. Now, they've only lost 3 of them. So, but again, I know that's been a point of emphasis for Ryan Day and his coaches. Interceptions, both Howard and Curtis have done very good with the protection of when they throw the football, each having 5. Of course, points off of turnovers, Indiana has 73 and Ohio State 59. Both very good, but you can see Indiana's off the charts. And then red zone touchdowns, Indiana 82%, Ohio State 87%. So you can see what I mean when I say that both these teams are really good in that category as 2 very, very good offenses that are nightmares for defensive coordinators to go against. And Ohio State's got some really good offensive weapons, especially at the wide receiver spot, and 2 good running backs. And so, you know, Ohio State is what Ohio State usually is year in, year out. They have some threats. Now, Indiana this year has more of a balanced football team than they have ever had. At the same time, they spread the ball pretty well around the group of receivers that they have and tight ends. So very evenly matched teams offensively. Let's look over on the defensive side of the ball here. And let's see. Okay, let's get my ugly mug out of there. When we go over to the defensive side of the ball, as you can see again, scoring defense, 3.5 points separate both of them. I think Ohio State may be 2 in the nation, and Indiana's like 5 in the nation scoring defense. Rushing yard defense, Indiana's number 1 in the country at 72. Ohio State, pretty darn good at 90. Total defense, 255, and that's not 345. That's a mistake on my part. That should be, I hit the wrong number. I'm going to get a lot of trouble by the Buckeye faithful. They're not going to like this by me showing that they're not that good defensively, but they are. So they are, I think that's 245, not 345. So again, what we get? 345. That should be 245. So even though there's a mistake up on the board there that I'm trying to correct, you can see that Ohio State is a very, very good defense as well. Third down efficiency, both in the low 30s as a defense. On fourth down, both 25%, 39%, still very good in that regard. Fumbles gained, Indiana's gained 6, Ohio State's gained 7. Interceptions, Indiana 11 and Ohio State 7. So I do believe Indiana does hold a distinct advantage in the turnover margin right now. I do believe they're like a plus 10 on the year, and Ohio State is somewhere like around plus 3. So they're both on the plus side. Indiana's just had a little bit more luck in that regard. Points given up off of turnovers, 20, and I think that's supposed to be 6, but maybe not in that regard. I think that is supposed to be 6. But point is, Indiana's done very good off of turnovers. When the offense has turned it over, they've done a good job of keeping teams out of the end zone, especially last week or 2 weeks ago against Michigan when Curtis Rourke opened the third quarter with the interception, and Michigan had the ball at the 5-yard line, and Indiana's defense withstood and didn't give them any points off of that drive, I don't believe. So red zone touchdowns percentage, Indiana at 55%, really good. This is where Ohio State becomes a little bit more stingy. Now, not too many teams have got inside the red zone when you're only giving up 10 points a game, and same in some respects, same with Indiana. But at the end of the day, as you can see there, both these teams are equally matched on both sides of the football, and it shows in the statistical categories. And that's what I was explaining to you earlier, that both teams have shown that offense and defensively, they have been very good. Now, Indiana, I believe, holds a slight edge in the hidden yardage game with their kicking game. Indiana has had a couple block punts that they've been able to get, touchdown return on a punt, and the real big one against Michigan that ultimately closed the game out 2 Saturdays ago. So as you can see, this ball game is going to be very tight Saturday afternoon, and could be a back and forth type of game, or it could be your classic Ohio State, Indiana, 3 yards in a cloud of dust is pretty good. So we'll have to see what all happens in that regard on Saturday. Now, the other thing is when you look at this, the data that we as analysts like myself and you as a fan, you got to look for things that there are some common opponents in. And this is where Indiana has been, let's see here. Yeah, this is what I want. Who are the common themes for Indiana and Ohio State? There are 3 teams, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Michigan State, that both Indiana and Ohio State has played this year. Ohio State beat Nebraska 21-17, 4-point win at home, scored very late in the fourth quarter because they trailed for the most part of the game, and Nebraska held Ohio State to their lowest output of the season. a week after Indiana had beat them 56-7 and 49-point win, and had to put a lot of yardage up against a stingy Nebraska team that everyone thought that Indiana was not going to be able to move the football against. Well, they came out of that off week and they were hitting on all cylinders, and they put a thumping on Nebraska. Then you look at Northwestern, which Ohio State just played a week ago. They got a 24-point win there at Wrigley Field, 31-7. Indiana had beaten Nebraska 41-24, 17-point win as well on the road. And then when you look at Michigan State, Ohio State had played them before Indiana did. They beat Michigan State 38-7, of course, 31-point win. Indiana beats Michigan State 47-10. And Indiana spotted Michigan State 10 points. And that was the first game that Indiana trailed after any point in a ball game. And it was after the first quarter, because then Indiana came back and put 47 straight points on the board for that win. So these are the three teams that right now is what you have to compare against when you think about these things with common opponents. Now, when you look at things with this strength of schedule on the year, Ohio State has a 28 strength of schedule, Indiana 106, and that's what we said. That's a pretty big differential when you look at it. Now, scoring margin in those three games between Nebraska, Northwestern, and Michigan State, Ohio State was a plus 59. Indiana was a plus 103. So that's a pretty big difference there. Yardage margin, Ohio State was a plus 418. Indiana was a plus 576 yardage differential. So Indiana had about 100 and what's that? 618, somewhere around there. But as you can see, there's a pretty good differential there in yardage. Turnover margin in those three games, Nebraska, Northwestern, Michigan State, Ohio State was a plus 3. Indiana was a plus 6. And the category that every offensive coach talks about, and you'll hear them always talk about, in order to be a good offense, you have to have explosive plays, no matter who you play. Ohio State, against those three common opponents, had a plus 7 explosive plays during those three games. Indiana had a plus 18. So Indiana had the more explosive offense against those three teams. Right now, the spread was Indiana. Ohio State was a 12.5 point favorite. The over-under is 51. The money line, of course, favors Ohio State, but the spread favors Indiana, as does the over and under from that standpoint. So you get a little bit of an idea there that there is some common things that you can look at. Now, you can't sit here and say, I'm going to rest, my case that Indiana was better against these three teams in these three categories, so therefore they're the better team. It just gives you a better idea when you're trying to differentiate between the two teams, because they're so close, and you have to look at common opponents. You take it for what it's worth. It's not, like I said, the holy grail of an analyst, but it does give you an idea the type of team Indiana has been, and when it comes to those common opponents between the two of them. But at the end of the day, they are both really good in a lot of ways when you think about it. Let's see here. One thing that I did see this week, I think, yep, there it is. This is the thing that is put out pretty regularly, and this is the one that's got all the algorithms in it that you can get. I think ESPN, I don't know if ESPN does this, I can't remember. But it's kind of in some respects like the PFF stuff that you see put out when you talk about grades of a team overall, in which Indiana has done fairly well for 10 weeks. And multitude of categories: offense, defense, and special teams. But right now, when you look at all this information in front of you, and some of this is about their offensive success rate, and you can see like there, Indiana's a 52.3 success rate on their drives, where Ohio State 48.8%, and Indiana's a 1, and I think Ohio State's fifth in the country. And then defensive success rate, two really good defense, 35.4 and 34.8 percentage on that. So really good there. And net points per drive, this is a pretty big one. When you look at it, Indiana's at 2.54, and they're second in the country, and Ohio State is 2.57, number 1 in the country. So right then and there gives you a good idea in that. And Indiana field position wise, this is where that hidden yardage comes in. They're number 2 in the country, and Ohio State's 51st. So there are some scenarios there where you get some common data points in looking at this. And then when you look at Ohio, Indiana, we did this already, but Indiana's offense versus Ohio State offense, you can see how good Indiana has been on the early downs EPA, and then third down and fourth down success as a combination of both. So, and then when you flip it to defense, you can see how many of them are, again, relatively close in their success in those categories. Now, when you take that and you put it all together, and I think you can see my thing here. Maybe I can put on my new toy here and see if that maybe helps. But you take all this together with all the data that we've seen, Indiana and Ohio State from that standpoint as well. Whoops, I screwed something up there, I think. Right now, when you get into these categories where, let's see if I can get this thing to write correctly. You've got this and win probability. So Indiana's right about a 40% with the projected point total against Ohio State 21. And Ohio State right now is 60% probability of winning and a 24-point output on the day. So a little bit under 4 points separates both of these teams. And I do think these data points have been a pretty good all year when it comes to teams looking at ways to data points, things like that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting caught in my head thinking about how I want to put it. But these are pretty good, data points you can look at and put out each week, and it gives you an idea of where a team is as a total team and where they stand amongst other teams in the conference and the country. And you couldn't get two teams that were as similar as these two. It's pretty much the way it's been for both of these squads thus far on the year, as it pertains to their successes that they've had as an offense and a defense. So a lot of interesting data points, things of that nature. And I want to see what I already went through that one. These are stats, and we've kind of done enough of that right now. And some of this stuff doesn't come up always as well in this platform that I use sometimes when I have issues with the other one that I've been using. But again, that gives you a pretty good idea as a whole where Indiana and Ohio State both fall when it comes to this game. on Saturday. I'm going to try to load some video up now and see what we can get here from these two teams. And I'm going to put, I had one that I thought I wanted. Here's some normal downs for Ohio State, and you're going to see some of this from a let's see if I can get it up here on the screen. There we go. That doesn't look too bad. May make it a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, you can't see it there. Doesn't always look good. Okay. Ohio State, as you can see here, I don't know if this transitions over as good as the other one, so I may have to use my other pen. But Ohio State, you're going to see predominantly a 4-down front with these guys, and 33 is a stud, and these three backers are really good. And, you know, their front seven is as good, if not a little better than Indiana's. Secondary wise, you're going to see a lot of man coverage, man free, something that Indiana's seen all year. Nothing different there. A lot of teams now defensively have gone to more of aggressive style of play where they've, basically man you up and try to get you doing stuff that you don't want to do. Now, what is happening at the top there, this guy right here blowing up the field, Indiana can't have any of that on Saturday. I mean, that guy is 5 yards in the backfield after the ball snapped, and it just causes problems. And you can see it, he ended up getting some yardage there because he's a good football player, that running back for them, as you can see. Now, you can see here that Ohio State is playing a little wide. This guy here is a linebacker. He's really good. And this guy's really good here. And then 33 are pretty good. Pretty much they're studs all the way around on this defense. Really good guy in that regard. So these are the guys that, you know, Indiana's going to have to be aware of where they're at so that they can know when and where they're at on the field so that they can account for them and things like that. But you can see here, 44 does a great job of getting upfield vertically. Vertical pressure or penetration will disturb a lot of good running teams. And this running back helped make his offensive lineman right. Again, this was Iowa a few weeks ago. Ohio State, I think this game was 7-0 at halftime, if I'm not mistaken. Iowa had a pretty good job of running the football. This is inside zone with a lead blocker, is what it turns out to be. And pretty good yardage there, being that it's a first down, normal down play. As you can see, alignments here. You got we call this guy here a 1 technique, a 3 technique. He's probably more of a 7 head up, and he's a 5 outside shoulder. That's how you classify their alignment with that. And this is a linebacker up. You got your Mike and Will backer here. And this guy is a strong safety that comes down in the box because they're playing man in behind it. And in theory, this guy has him one-on-one, and as does him. So that's kind of how you look at that from a scheme way and all that. And let me see if I can get that junk all off of there. I think there's a way I can do it. There we go. I figured it out. But here's that inside zone play that I just talked about. And these guys run it pretty good. Center's got to come up more vertical there on that defensive lineman so he doesn't put his guard on an island. But they block this really good. and they get good yardage on a first down play. So again, first down plays, remember, first and second downs, you want to have a efficiency of about 4 yards to 5 yards. Okay, tight end trade, so they go from what I would call a wing into the boundary, twins to the field, to really what we would call a tight 3-by-1, because you've got 3 potential receivers at the top and only 1 at the bottom. Iowa's going to run their version of toss or outside zone because that's what they're blocking, and not too bad of a job. And running back blew it up in there. As you can see, this is a little different now because you've got 2 guys in what we call 2-eye techniques. They're inside of the guards. So they're basically in the B gap. So these backers, he's got B gap, B gap. These guys have got C gap. This guy may be coming in that C gap, and this guy would have that gap. So they're covered down in all their positions. Okay, let it run here. Yeah, if 6, that linebacker doesn't, he forces it upfield, and I don't know what the tight end's doing there, 87, because that's his guy. He's not worried about that stack backer. He should be going outside there to number 6, and if he does that, you got a pretty good potential for a nice little cut back lane right there, and you're going to have to take him on, but, you know, it's an opportunity to get positive yardage and get vertical as soon as possible. Again, 7-0 Ohio State, and I think that's what it was. And at the end of the first half, Ohio State hasn't been known to get off to great starts this year. Oh, that same play, dummy. This is what we call a little bit like some would call it a power, some call it a fold ISO because they're isolating that backer. And Ohio State really has them outnumbered here because of how they're aligning this, because this guy here, you got 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th guy, and this is the 5th guy, and they just don't have enough guys to truly block him, and this guy's going to be a problem unless they do something with him to try to get him in tighter. And so this probably ain't going to be a great play where they're running it here. They'd be better running it up here at the top, because you can see that there's a big void right in that alley, and they're asking him to play it and this guy to fill it from that position. So, and they've got the guys to do it. It's not that they can't do it, but, you know, it's not a great play here that Iowa's running because they're running it right into the teeth of that defense. All right, let's put on some Ohio State offense here. Let's do all right, this is Ohio State normal downs, and this is where they make their bread and butter. So really good wideouts, really good running backs, and pretty decent offensive line. Now they just lost their center to an Achilles heel tear, just like we did Evans. So both teams are suffered with that. So this guy was a transfer. He was a transfer from Alabama, I believe, this center, and he's out. So I think it's this guy who was their starting center last year at guard. He's just going to move back inside. So I don't think they're going to miss a lot, but again, it can be a little funky when you put guys that haven't been playing a lot, like Indiana had to with Stevens that last week. This is an inside zone. Pretty good, pretty well blocked. I do not know what 34 this linebacker's doing. He runs himself out of his gap. Like, What are you doing, dude? Good play by that D lineman, 95. He did a good job there. Stood him up, shedded him, and made a play. That was really good by him. Okay, another first down. Chip Kelly is probably one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. Very imaginative with his play calling, formations, and how he likes to try to find the matchups. This is a version of how they like to run counter. They pull the guard and the tight end, and they take the tackle backside, and I'll show it from that perspective when we get over there. How they like to block this, because what they like to do is block this guy head up instead of having him come down for a backer, where you block back and down. So we'd give a tag to this tackle, and we used to call it stick. That means he stood on it. These guys are going to block back. He's going to hinge, block back here, and then this cat's pulling and this cat's pulling. And it's kind of a student body left. It's a great play. Indiana was running this early in the season, and they got away from it for whatever reason. Now, Iowa does a good job defending it here. And remember, Iowa's got a pretty good defense as well. And they've had defenses that have ranked in the tops in the country at times. Now, this was a better job by 34 because he stacks in behind that DN, and that guard can't get to him, and he's there with 10 to make a play. Again, inside zone with some schemes there and how they're doing it. And they do a great job of it. So a lot of this is just their running backs can get it now. They try to get them out on the hitting it downhill and running, and they get around you. You better look out, because they're going to be a problem for you. Okay, let's see here. I had some. This is the one thing that Indiana's just going to have to can't give up the cheap play. And Ohio State's offense, just like Indiana, they've had some nice big plays. Will Howard's a big quarterback. He can run it, and he can throw it halfway decent. This wideout just splits these two and runs right by him because he's got a lot of speed. If it's 4, he's a freshman. That's the freshman. This guy right here is a true freshman out of Florida, and he's 6'3" and about 200 pounds, and he can run like a deer. So he is definitely somebody that Indiana cannot give him big plays down the field, because that's what he's done all year long. Get a chance to see some of their pass protection here. Very solid, very good. I mean, the defensive end top falls on his knees. They're doing those twists inside here. It's really interesting because watch these two. Is this a hold on offense or a hold on defense? Because he looks like he's trying to grab and pull so that they can get this guy free. But that one was tough to see if you're going to throw a flag either way. But this is what you can't have. You can't have the big plays down the field like that. You got to make them earn it. Have to make them earn it. Here's another one, 23 yards down the field. I think Ohio State actually turns it over here. Yeah, this is their little screen that they get, little tunnel screen. They run it really good. And they're throwing it to that freshman, and he put it on the ground, and Iowa was able to get it. It's 20. I think it's what, 21-7 here. No, 21 to nothing with time waning. This one goes for 21 yards off of play action, RPO type of setup. You see Indiana run this, and I don't know what this guy's thinking. Okay. He's playing outside leverage. So he's thinking he's got inside help. Well, this guy has got to take this guy if he goes out. So he doesn't have any over the top help. So I'm not sure what this cat's thinking. And this is like stealing candy from a baby. I mean, this is what Curtis does too. I mean, you give guys like Howard and Curtis time to sit back and find it and rip it. I mean, that coverage there just didn't make no sense to me at all. Another 20-yard plus play here coming up. Just like Indiana, Ohio State defensively hasn't been given up a bunch, but this is just inside zone on a 1st and 10 play, and he just throws a guy off of him. So that cat, I think this is 32. No, it's 1. He's strong. He's like the kid from Washington. And he likes physicality, and he gives it out as much as he gets it. Again, nothing over dramatic, just a bunch set down here, 3 receivers bunched up, and they run what, kind of like we call burst routes. They condense the formation by bunching it here. And then you can see at the snap of the ball, they're all going to a certain point on the field. And this guy's running a wheel route. And this is a great throw. That's a great throw. There's nothing you can say about that one. A really good throw by him. All right. All right. I'm going to throw up this last one here. This is Ohio State's defense inside the red zone. Penn State, they just didn't do a great job in some of these things here. But Ohio State, they run well, just like Fisher. This is a kid like Fisher. He's just running, making a play, and you got an offensive lineman who's not blocking anybody. Pretty standard alignment. They're going to leverage you. They're not going to let you out leverage you, because this is a linebacker here, and he's going to make sure that he has leverage on this. And you got guys that can play it up while he turns it in. And so this guy is the one that's going to make the play, but these guys do their job of making sure that they do a good job of leveraging it. Play, baby. All right, here we go. That's where the cut has to be, but you got 2 guys that are unblocked, and that's usually what happens. Unblocked players make plays. This is 2nd and 12 there on the 14. Kind of their version of Wildcat, running an isolation play. It looks good at the start, but they do a good job of shedding some guys up front. I want to get to that last series here. Hold on. This is the interception that he throws on the goal line after a big play. And this DB down here, he's a physical kid. Can't remember his name, but he does get a little handsy down here, and he ends up intercepting that ball. Crazy. Really good ball too. This was a great throw by Penn State's QB. But see, I don't understand how this is an intercept. Oh, that wasn't the interception. Okay. I was like, wait a minute, that can't be an interception. There's no way. This is the latter part of the ball game. And Penn State's got it all the way down here. And you can see they got a lot of bodies over on this one side. I mean, there's a lot of dudes over here, as you can see. And this is Ohio State stuffs them 4 straight plays. Now, one is Altmaier, or I think it's Altmaier, is Reed. And so you can see, number one, tell the quarterback if his shoulders are square, hand it off. And this guy at the top does a great job of defending it. I think there's a lot of bodies over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bodies. And basically they're in a bear front. But if I was going to run the ball, I think I'd be trying to find ways to run it this way. It's not that hard. You got a lot of guys over here, so run it here. Penn State sometimes, I don't think they, and this is the coordinator that came from Kansas that had all that luck. And they're just trying to run a wedge, and Ohio State says, okay, we'll gobble you up. And again, a lot of bodies. They use a guard out here to be kind of the hammer and nail concept. But here's one. If he's got a read option here, and he's essentially reading this guy, and you got this big fella coming, you got a hat for basically everybody. He's got a hat for him. This quarterback should walk in here. I mean, all honesty, he should walk in there. It's even bad on the end zone. So now they're more balanced because they got a more of a balanced formation. So now you got kind of some hats on a hat. So if he's gonna end up reading a guy, and he is going to read this guy here, this guy here, and this guy is going to be picked up by the big fellow coming in motion. He pulls that off. He walks in. If he pulls it there, he walks in the end zone. So I'm not sure. This can't be just a call it and run it. I just can't understand it because he's looking at him. And his read, that guy's diving down. His shoulders are not square. He's committed, as is the corner. He would walk in there. Man, oh, man. And then they do 3rd and 2. Let's do it again. Same play. Do you think he walks in the end zone? Oh, my God. Look at all that green grass, and everybody on Ohio State is in here. Wow. This makes no sense. If you're going to call this play down there and you're not going to have the ability to read it and go out here and run. Look at that. He walks in, and that play right there ultimately cost him the game, because the next after this play, and there's the end zone, that's just going to make it look even worse. But there's no way that, I just can't imagine them calling this and not having the ability on that one. So as you can see, you got to be pretty good down in that red zone against these guys, or you're going to not get in the end zone. It's simple as that. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me tonight. I know this was taped instead of live, so I apologize for that. Hope you got something out of this one. I did get a little bit over the top there at the end, as you can tell. I like to watch film, especially when you get the all 22 and you get the wide in the end zone. You get a little bit more better perspective of a play than you do just seeing it from the wide point of view, either they're in the stands or on video. But I do appreciate you hanging in there, being with me tonight. Big game Saturday afternoon, noon kickoff at Ohio State, Fox Network. Remember, if you're heading over there, be safe on your travels over, and make sure you in advance figure out your parking, and you'll thank me for it later, because you'll have a plan and not just go over there wishing and hoping. So we'll catch you again on Monday to get a recap of this game. You can catch me on Jim Coyle, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, after the game, and our post game show that will come on 30 minutes after the game is over, about once they get the interviews done. But again, appreciate you being with me here tonight. And I am the coach, Shannon Griffith. You've been watching the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on Believe.